Okay, joining us now to discuss yesterday's multilateral meeting at the White House is James Gorey, foreign affairs analyst and author of the book, The China Crisis. James discusses current events in China on his blog and YouTube podcast called The Banana Republican. So, James, it's good to see you. It's been a while. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Don. How are you doing? Nice to be here.
I'm doing well. So before we get to our main topic today, you heard that soundbite from President Trump, right? I thought it was quite humorous that President Trump is saying he wants to get to heaven. I wonder if you want to react to that.
I think we all want to get to heaven. I think that if Trump wants to get to heaven, though, the works won't get him there. I think his faith in Jesus Christ as his Savior will get him there. So our works won't get us there, but I do nonetheless agree with what he's trying to accomplish in terms of stopping the war and stopping the bloodshed.
So on the events yesterday, James, ahead of that White House meeting, the German foreign minister who was in Japan said that Russia's war is made possible by Chinese support. And you've talked about this subject on your podcast, The Banana Republican. Can you elaborate further on this point for us?
Sure. Look, China is the number one importer rather, of Russian oil, which is a huge part of their economy. China exports to Russia as well, dual-use technology that can, commercial as well as military uses. They're sending them high-tech laser systems for anti-drone, shooting down drones and so forth from Ukraine. They're sending them drone engines, described as industrial refrigeration units. So China is playing a huge role, and they are supporting the war. They're enabling Russia to fight this war.
So how do you think the Chinese Communist Party was viewing yesterday's meetings? What are Chinese officials saying about it, would you imagine?
Well, China is, on the one hand, saying that there ought to be peace, but their actions say otherwise. And even their foreign minister, Wang Yi, said in July that China wants the war to continue because it allows or it forces the U.S. focus to remain in Europe and Russia and Ukraine rather than on China. So I think China is a bit concerned, as they should be, that an arrangement is made between the U.S., NATO, and Europe on one side, the EU, and Ukraine and Russia. If there's peace, that will come at a price, but it also come at benefits. And some of the benefits, I'm sure, will be things like direct foreign investment into Russia, access to Western markets for Russia, other things like that really China can't provide so much. So I think there's a tremendous amount of concern on the one hand from China that Trump will be able to, with a peace agreement, turn Russia westward and have Russia questioning the long-term benefits of partnering with China, especially as a junior partner, which they don't like.
So you were talking about how the CCP perhaps may be worried of what may have come out of yesterday's events. Specifically, what do you think China may be feeling in seeing that, many analysts are saying that it has brought the U.S., European nations closer together, Ukraine as well. What do you think China is thinking about that? How is it viewing this sort of united front of the U.S. and Europe and NATO leaders?
Oh, they're viewing it as a threat, as anyone would. They're as an economic threat, as a diplomatic threat. And if you know China-Russia relations and histories, it's not built on trust. They're long-term and long-time adversaries for influence in Central Asia along their border. And again, Russia doesn't like being the junior partner behind China. And so China is very concerned about that. Furthermore, Russia knows that China is a declining economic power. Foreign investment in China is cratered. It's down by 70, 80, 90% in the last 3 or 4 years. Companies are leaving China. And the investment scene is in the U.S. and in Europe, and to a large extent, as well as India. So China should be worried because I think Trump is making a bigger play here. He wants to turn Russia westward, if he can, and split that, or at least weaken or minimize their cooperation. And he's got a long way to go, but I think that's his goal because he's he's pulling an old Nixon trick, right? He's instead of using China to offset Russia back in the 70s, he's using Russia to weaken China in the 21st century.
And since we have you here, James, let's go into the nitty-gritty. Do you think China wants this war to continue? Do you think it wants the war to end? And has that position changed since yesterday's meetings?
Oh, China wants the war to continue. As long as the war continues, the U.S. focus will be more on Russia and Ukraine and Europe, which is what China wants. They want the U.S. not focused on Taiwan or in China. Trump's attention on Europe is where China wants it. They don't want Trump's attention on China. But nonetheless, I think the Trump administration will be able to do both. But that's their problem. That's their concern, definitely.
And you mentioned that the CCP is seeing perhaps the U.S. is trying to pull Russia westward. On that point, what do you think the CCP might communicate, if anything, to Russia before the potential trilateral meeting that we've been hearing about between President Trump, President Zelensky, and Putin?
Well, I think there's another piece to this, and that is the BRICS financial system. It's a challenge to the dollar-denominated global financial system. And China will be reminding Russia that they are an integral part of the BRICS organization, which now includes Indonesia, I believe, as of today. So the BRICS is expanding and is a longer-term play on the de-dollarization of the world. So China's going to remind Russia that they will still be under the yoke and control in terms of sanctions and everything else that goes along with it if they remain within the U.S. financial orbit and don't pursue the BRICS transformation that they're so diligently trying to bring about.
Okay, James, I hope you have a bit of time here to help me understand the situation. What is China's stake in this conflict? Why is it supporting Russia? What is its goal ultimately? What does it want in the end? Why does it want the war to continue?
So this has been described as literally a proxy conflict between the U.S. and China. China's proxy is Russia. The U.S.'s proxy is Ukraine. Now, it may not have started that way, or it may, but that's what it's shaping up to be if you look at it that way. And so China wants, again, to diminish the American ability, the U.S.'s ability to project power, to have its prestige. So in other words, a prolonged war will diminish Trump's diplomatic power. If he's not able to bring peace, it will diminish the American influence in the region. It'll diminish the American influence in Asia in terms of its ability to defend Taiwan against a potential Chinese invasion. And it will cast doubt on other security arrangements. So there's a lot at stake here.
So do you think the West has any leverage over China in all this to try to discourage its support for Moscow, to try to bring an end to this war?
There is some leverage in terms of the trade tariffs and so forth, which Trump is still negotiating. The Trump administration is still negotiating with China about. And China has leverage as well. They hold an awful lot of U.S. Treasury bills. And so that's a much more complex dance. And that relationship is much less kind of easily handled. It's a very complicated situation there. So the U.S. does have levers in terms of trade, in terms of sanctions, in terms of tariffs. And it can use the advantages of the European Union and the U.S. market to try to attract Russia, again, turn them westward and abandon China, or at least minimize their relationship. But again, China will fight back with and argue that they're better off under the BRICS, where they can, quote unquote, kind of direct their own future, as it were, as a member of a financial system that's counterweight to the dollar. And so I think there's a lot of give and take there. Russia wouldn't mind if the U.S. Influences in the world were less than they are now as well. So it may be a long play. It may be a doomed to failure play. Putin may draw it out and end up having no peace whatsoever, which may be the goal as well. We don't know exactly. But I think that China and Russia are both fearing a unified U.S., NATO, European Union, especially given the fact that defense budgets will rise up to 5% in the coming year or so within Europe, and those expenditures will be targeting Russian aggression. So there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Right, definitely a lot of moving parts here. There's one more thing I want to know, James, and maybe you can comment on it. Has the handling of this Ukraine conflict by the West, by the United States, has it enabled or curbed Beijing's ambitions to take Taiwan?
I think it has enabled them only for the sense that we've committed so much in terms of expenditures and material to the Ukraine situation, to Ukraine. So I think it hasn't enhanced our ability to defend Taiwan, but just by definition, we've got billions and hundreds of billions of dollars going elsewhere. But so it hasn't helped. And I think the longer it goes on, the more deleterious it is, the more downgrades our influence in other parts of the world. So the world is watching how we defend Ukraine. Because Taiwan's watching and China's watching. And any other security agreement we have, and we do have security agreements with Ukraine. So the world's watching that, and they're going to decide or make a judgment if we're up to the task of meeting our obligations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so many leaders gathered yesterday, top leaders from Europe. The world has to be watching closely to see what happens next, right? But thank you very much for your time today. It was a great discussion. Pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you.